we ready? It's a time for a pop quiz.
I'm ready.
What is Kettleman City, California? Where is it? What is it? How do you understand Kettleman City, please, in the back?
I'm guessing it's north of California.
You're guessing it's north of here, yeah?
No, it's toxic waste.
It's toxic waste. Oh, it's getting worse.
It's near Fresno off the 41.
Off the 41, Fresno, we're having three fascinating answers, none of which are going in the right direction. Stuart, it's on the 5. It is
Almost about halfway between here.
Thanks, Stuart. This is Stuart. Stuart was my camper. Camps way back in the day. That's why he gets all the right answers. Well done. Kettleman City, California is located in the Central Valley on Interstate 5. It is just about 200 miles from here, which is about 200 miles from San Francisco.
What county?
It is there. Oh, that is such an excellent question. I'm going to look that up.
Probably
I'm going to say Kern because I don't know if anyone actually knows. Is that right? Oh man, I'm so good. That's a good. All right. So here's what Kettleman City, California is known for. 3 things: food, fast food, gasoline, and bathrooms. That's the only. And cows, yeah, but for us, making the drive up north, that's where you go, for food, gas, and bathrooms, except, oh, hold on. I've got a vision. There it is. Yeah, there I am in Kettleman City, California. It was really special for me. One day in my academic career, Kettleman City possessed magical power. Now we're going to switch from humor to serious, because I was involved in a 3-year campus anti-Semitism fight here in the Los Angeles area. I won't mention the name in case anyone here has heard of Pasadena City College. But there I was labeled a self-hating leftist Jew. It got so bad that I had to resign my tenure and move with my family to the job I currently have at San Francisco State University.
Where were you?
I was at Pasadena City College, and then I went to SF State. There we are, up at SF State. And that night, as I was unpacking my books in my new office in San Francisco, I learned that I had become a right-wing Zionist colonizer. How does one go from a self-hating leftist Jew to a right-wing Zionist colonizer in one day? It must have been Kettleman City. And my niece is here, a graduate of SF State, go Gators! So, tonight's talk unwinds that 400-mile drive. And here's the question for the night. For those of you taking notes, how on earth can anti-Semitism exist on a college campus? A place where professors and college administrators are supposed to be the nation's and the world's smartest people. And just so you know, I finished, this is a new book, I finished it before October 7th. It's stalled in the production process for way too long. And I had to rewrite a bit of it after October 7th, but we can talk about that in a moment. The thesis: on many college campuses, white Jews get caught between the politics of the far left and rejection from the far right. Anti-Zionists on progressive campuses pressure Jewish students to check their support for Israel, while right-wing universities, and there are a few, consider Jews a leftist threat to their way of doing things. At its essence, universities are caught between two contradictory definitions of their mission. Are they a marketplace of ideas that wants all views expressed, or are they the identity project, which is ethnic studies, that centers political activism among its diverse student population? In my career, and the 2 stories I'm going to share tonight, I learned that Jews are part of both approaches, yet alienated from each. Professors have claimed these differing pedagogies to launder anti-Semitism on campus all the same. So this book is about 3 things. Number 1, anti-Semitism, from both the political right and the political left. Number two, it's about the university's very nature and purpose, and how that fits into campus anti-Semitism. And third, it's about identity politics. What does it mean to be an engaged Jewish student on campus? What does it mean, in my second story, to be an engaged Zionist on campus? And I'll just show the irony because you do look like a good crowd. I was shouted down at the University of Michigan last December for being a Zionist on campus. Not giving this talk, I was actually giving the Black Power Civil Rights talk, which is what made it clearly anti-Semitic, because if I was coming in to give this talk, at least we could have a debate about that. So I just want to share that two of my siblings here, my brother Jeff and my sister Cynthia, because I'm going to tell a story from our childhood right now. There it is. Our mom of blessed memory went to the University of Connecticut, go Huskies, where the men are men and the women are national champions. That says when you drive in. I was in the third grade. My brother was in fourth grade. You're probably like kindergarten when we went. I don't know if you remember the trip to Connecticut, but back when we were that young. Mom took us to tour UConn, and that was the first time I can remember learning what college was, and that phrase, when you go off to college. And it was a great visit until we got to a room that my mom described as the dormitories. The dormitory, she explained, is where you're going to live when you go off to college. And at that moment in third grade, I internalized the notion that going off to college meant leaving home. So I let my mom know in no uncertain terms I would never be going off to college, and I'd never live in a dormitory because I never wanted to leave. And she laughed at me and said, when you're old enough to go off to college, you'll want to leave. That was good maternal advice, and that was what I did.
Did you live at home?
That's what?
Did you go to college?
I went to college, and go Bears, UC Berkeley, as well. So, the book title. When you write a book, so by the way, the book is done, it's just sitting trying to get printed somewhere, and the last thing that happens when you write a book, ironically, is you get the title, and then usually the author doesn't pick the title. Typically, you have whatever title you want, and then your editor tells you what the title is going to be. So I brainstormed a list of about 30 really dumb titles that didn't work. I just kept the Microsoft Word file going for this. And then I went to New York, and I sat with my friend Amanda Berman. Amanda Berman is a litigator, attorney, and she's most famous for me because she sued me. I mean, she sued my university, SF State, which we'll get to in a moment. But we become good friends nonetheless. And she is now the founder and executive director of a group called Zioness, which is a women's, feminist, progressive Zionist organization, which means she gets it from all sides. And every time I go to New York, I want to sit with her and say, what is it like to be Amanda Berman this week? And then I told her that I need, hold on, I think I got a Zionist slide up here. There we are. So I told her that I needed a book title from her, and then I laughed and said, there's no book title, but at least let me tell you what this book is. And we're chatting back and forth, and then she asked me what was kind of a dumb question, but she said, did anti-Semitism start in the university and spread to society, or vice versa? I let her know she's been spending too much time suing universities for campus anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism predates the university. It's been around for thousands of years. And then she said, wait a minute, what's that word? She said, okay, so the anti-Semitism comes from society, it comes into the university, the professors clean it up into something respectable, and send it back out into society. What's that word with the drug dealers who do that with the money? And then I looked at her and I said, oh my God, you just came up with the title. Laundering Antisemitism, Ethnic Studies, Identity Politics, and the University. So I give her credit and I thank her for that. And then we move to PCC. My office mate was Dr. Milton Brown. Dr. Brown was a generation older than I, a scholar of race and ethnicity, a disciple of Malcolm X in his generation, and he actually was the president of Malcolm X College in Chicago, and was coming out to LA to retire, and we got to be in the same office together, which meant you walked through my office, and then you got to his office. So we tried to do office hours at different times, so that we would, but inevitably we're both going to show up in office hours. And his specialty was black men in sports, because he was also a former minor league professional ball player. And this football player from our team goes in and sits down and shares his excitement about playing on Sundays, playing in the NFL. And Milton, Dr. Brown, said to him, "You're not going to play in the NFL," which I thought was not a nice thing to say to this young man who was very excited about a possible pro career. And then Milton started going after him personally and asked him about whether or not his father was on the scene, asked him the kind of stress his mother was under raising him, asked if he was studying, asked if he was partying, asked him what kind of friends he was hanging out with. And by the time Milton finished, this kid was utterly destroyed. And I watched him walking out, and I waited till he got far enough down the hall of the C building that he couldn't hear me. And I walked back to Milton, and because we were friends, I spoke in the vernacular, and I said, "Milton, you can get your ass fired for shit like that. What on earth are you doing?" And he smiled and said, "White boy, take a seat." And put me in the same seat that his student athlete was sitting. And he said, "Let me tell you about the sociology of race in that young man in community college." He said, if he was good enough to play in the NFL, he would have been Division I SC or UCLA down the road. He would not be here. He's being duped into thinking he can be a pro athlete, and he will end up a college dropout. And I know that the chances are he will end up in jail or 6 feet under. And my job as his professor is to stop that from happening and to get him out of here into a 4-year program and to get him his bachelor's degree. And then he said, "Mark, what do you talk about in your office hours?" I said, "What's your thesis? Do you have evidence from the reading? How is that significant?" And he smiled at me and said, "I just can't wait till I can turn my office hours into yours." That was the first moment I understood what I learned to be the identity project. For Milton, race matters. I mean, it was his academic specialty, it was a sociology class he taught at PCC, it animated his entire life. He was the co-chair of the state of New Jersey's Black Jewish Alliance. So he had seen people like me, in his earlier career. And Milton let me know that he had to bring his blackness to campus, to his class, to his classroom, to his students. And here I was, raised in the idea that to be a professional is not to bring personal stuff into your professional workplace. And he reminded me that PCC is 90% students of color. And if the faculty don't recognize that, how can you possibly be student-centered? So I looked at Milton and I just try to figure out, what the parallel would be. Like, when am I going to be like Milton in that office hour? The best I could come up with is I would have to have been like the first Jewish tenured professor at Columbia in like 1900, and some Yiddish-speaking kids fresh off the boat, and they show up in my office and they don't know where they're going, and I speak to them in Yiddish and give them advice, and it just didn't work. Because you can't compare the experience Milton is describing about racism in America to what I would have been dealing with in 1900. This is a rhetorical question. Should Jewish faculty follow the identity project, as Milton was expressing, or the notion that the university is a marketplace of ideas, a center of critical inquiry, a place where we teach students how to think, not what to think, a place where we never bring our politics into our classroom. Growing up, when I went to UConn with my mom, it was the center of critical inquiry. UCLA grad school, same thing. But once I got there to PCC, I understood that the Identity Project Ethnic Studies was certainly worthy of examination, and it came pretty quick and intense. The Humanities Block Program at PCC. It's an incredible program, 100 undergraduates who enroll together in the same 5 classes across the disciplines. Ended up with 6 professors teaching the 5 classes. And they had a unit on the Holocaust. Almost no Jewish students, almost no Jewish faculty or administrators at PCC, so I was especially excited that they were studying the Holocaust. They did a visit to the Simon Wiesenthal Center. They had a Holocaust survivor come in and talk to the group. It was great. Until the director of the program shared with me excitement that the scholar they were going to bring in to talk about the Holocaust was Irv Rubin, the head of the Jewish Defense League. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. So for the rest of you, I will now translate the yikes. The JDL is a designated domestic terrorist organization by the FBI. The motto of the JDL is every Jew at 22 and stay alive with a 45. For more illustration, when Mayor Kahane, the founder of the JDL, moved to Israel, he put Irv in charge of the JDL in North America. Mayor Kahane then began the fascist, racist, right-wing political parties, of which Ben Gvir and Smotrich, the current ministers in Netanyahu's government in Israel, are a part. The JDL claimed Baruch Goldstein, who was a New York-raised Jewish immigrant who went and shot dozens of Muslims while they prayed in Hebron. Rubin himself had a history of violence. Why on earth would any professor ever invite a person like this to teach a class? Oh, thank you for that blessed response. Here's the actual response. Jerry Springer. It turns out Irv was on the Jerry Springer show in an episode you'll see in here called Clanfrontation, when he got into a physical altercation with members of the KKK, and I learned that from previous years they brought him to campus to recreate an episode of reality TV in their classroom, with Irv as the star of the show. The students loved the spectacle, I was told, all at the cost of Holocaust education, and the depiction of Jews, and the worst part, Irv didn't know that he was being brought in to be a clown. In every possible way, this was the worst decision. As I wrote in the book, it was all a ruse, an attempt by faculty to get a rise from their students, achieved at a personal cost to Rubin, an educational cost to our college, and a larger communal cost to Jews and Jewish education. At once, Rubin played the provocateur, using our college to advance his organization's mission, as well as the pawn, played so the humanities block professors could entertain their students. The clowning of the JDL leader undermined the very foundation of what a college education should strive to achieve. It laundered the worst of pop culture into a university-approved lesson that undergraduates needed to learn as part of their course requirements. All right, how do you justify this? In their mind, the marketplace of ideas approach to the university justifies this. College should be a place to hear differing views. Rubin was different. If you oppose Rubin, you were undermining the very purpose of a college education. You were denying him free speech. You were denying the professors academic freedom in their own classrooms. I was bringing apparently my own left-leaning politics into the classroom to push out a right-wing Jew I didn't like. And with this mindset, it was the inviting faculty who were supporting the mission of the college, and I became the one undermining it. Academic freedom guarantees their right to do that, and I did not contest that fact. But it turns out academic freedom also gives you the right to dissent, or at least it should, and I certainly dissented. Laundering anti-Semitism. This was actually a group of professors who were abusing the marketplace of ideas to launder anti-Semitism. Colleges should be a place where students hear multiple perspectives, should be a place where professors decide what to teach in their classroom, but when that power is abused in anti-Semitic ways, we must protect the right to dissent as well. At PCC, faculty use the marketplace of ideas as cover. When I exercised dissent, they retaliated. Even though I had tenure, because tenure is supposed to protect you to be able to do this, unequal power dynamics remained. This was the old guard faculty, and they kept the anti-Semitic laundromat going with fierce retaliation. So, a philosophy professor let me know that he was re-inviting Reuben. It was a logic class. He wanted me to debate him in front of the class. I refused. And when I did, he invited Reuben to spend the hour discussing the topic, Professor Dollinger's cowardice for refusing to debate. And then he changed the written final exam to a single question: was Professor Dollinger a coward for refusing to debate? Reuben named me his Peak of the Week. He had on his website along with a photograph of me. And as a result, I received an email from a JDL member in the Midwest holding an assault rifle, standing in front of a helicopter that said JDL on it. The message in the email said, quote, "Do I need to come to Pasadena to take care of business?" My dean, the extraordinary Gretchen Anderson, the first female dean in our division, refused to approve Reuben's visit. And when she refused, the college president removed her from her deanship and later fired her for her actions. When asked why she was removed from her position, the president told her, quote, "Because you supported Marc," unquote. Defend a Jewish faculty member as a non-Jew and get fired. The president went to a Jewish dean and demanded that she sign. And when she did, the president boasted that since the Jewish dean approved, this was merely an internal dispute among campus Jews. When I took my concerns to the president, he said this was a dispute, quote, between 6 faculty members and an oddball. I was the oddball. I gave him credit for saying it to my face. When students put approved protest flyers on campus bulletin boards, they were mysteriously removed. When students organized a protest, the provost of the college physically restrained an undergraduate, demanding to know his name, the name of the professor who put him up to it, and threatened to expel him from school. He wanted to transfer to UCLA. He was freaked out by that. He came to me and said, I got to end this. And I said, absolutely. You stop protesting, you get out of this building, you run down Colorado Boulevard, you don't stop till you get to Westwood, you know. I'm happy to say he graduated from UCLA, has a master's degree in psychology, and is practicing now. On the day of Reuben's talk, police gathered outside the lecture hall to arrest protesting students, rather than positioning themselves inside the lecture hall to protect the attendees from Reuben himself. Each of these actions reaffirmed a campus climate where Jewish concerns did not matter, and where expressing concerns meant a whole lot of trouble. And then it got worse. Milton, Dr. Brown, was arrested by campus police in his class in front of his students for allegedly threatening a white woman. What he said to the white woman was, quote, "Whatever you put out into the world comes back to you." I kind of think that's spiritual. Put out love, love comes out back. Put out hate, hate comes back. The editor of the school newspaper gave Reuben an op-ed, and he was the one who called me a sulking leftist Jew in an op-ed, and called for my firing, and called for Gretchen's firing as well. Then he taped his business card to my door, so that I knew that he knew where I worked, and that he would be back to find me. I received threats of physical violence, and I went to the campus police chief to get a police escort on campus. I don't want to stereotype community college police officers, but he was right out of Central Casting. 6'2", 250-pound, good old boy. And I told him my story. And his response to my story was, let me see if I remember the words. Oh yes, I remember the words. Did I ever tell you what it was like for me to bake challah with my buddy? And for those challenged by the Yiddish, that was his way of telling me he was Jewish. So I looked at him and said, "You're Jewish?" And he said, "I'm Jewish. The world needs more Irv Rubins, and you don't get police protection." I went back to Milton in the office and said, "I'm a white man in America, but I gotta tell you, it does not feel good to go to the police for protection and find out that they are a threat." Thankfully, I want to honor Doug Brown, my student that semester, who organized the entire U.S. history 1877 to the present class to be my campus escorts, and they walked me in and off campus each and every day. At this point, as you might imagine, it began reaching the press. The BCC Courier, Pasadena Weekly, LA Times, and the marketplace of ideas at PCC failed. That approach to university education failed for me as a Jew. Thanks to Milton, though, there was another approach to what it meant to go off to college. The Identity Project, Ethnic Studies. Milton taught me that my Jewishness mattered. He taught me that PCC was not a third-person center of critical inquiry. It was not apolitical. It was instead a reflection of larger social realities. Antisemitism exists on the political right, and it exists on the PCC campus. Was I to continue pretending that I could keep my politics, my Jewish identity, out of my workplace and out of my classroom? Or would I follow Milton's lead, embrace my identity, and get rid of the marketplace of ideas and embrace ethnic studies? He intervened with his student athlete because he knew what it was to be a black man in America. Would I intervene against this retaliation campaign because I knew what it meant to be an identified Jew at PCC? And as you can probably tell by the fact that you're here for the talk, I joined Milton. And together, we organized San Gabriel Valley's first ever town hall meeting on diversity. Something really special started happening. Faculty reached out to me in support. That's actually not true. They didn't. Black faculty, Latino faculty, women, LGBTQ plus faculty began reaching out to me in support. And each one of them quietly shared their own horrible campus stories. Women spoke of sexual harassment and even sexual assault. Black and brown faculty spoke about racism. Their experiences, as they told them, were far worse than what I was experiencing, and I never knew. And I didn't know because those stories aren't told publicly by people who will be victimized again by telling their stories. And I sort of earned credit enough to have them come and share them as a consequence of what was happening. And through it all, Milton narrated for me. As he said, this is about anti-Semitism, but it's about more than that. It's about how all of us on the outside of power face discrimination. And as he said, if they can do this to a white man, none of us are safe. That was his biggest shock, right? He's seen this a lot. He's never seen a white guy have this happen. This is also the marginal status of white Jews. Would you universalize your struggle? Will you invite others to share their pain with you? Can we join together to make this campus better for everyone? Absolutely yes. I was all in on the Identity Project. Milton's Black Studies and my Jewish Studies joined forces to this town hall on diversity, and it was fantastic. I talked on anti-Semitism, Milton on racism, Gretchen, the dean, spoke on sexism. 300 people attended, 40 co-sponsoring community-based organizations from San Gabriel. Even the president of PCC attended. I think he understood politically there was no way he could miss it. And It was a really evening.
What year was
That was 1999. Just so you know, when I first wrote the book, I didn't put in any dates, because I was afraid if you put in a date, they'll think, oh, it's old, no, campus anti-Semitism doesn't happen anymore. And then after October 7th, I went and put the dates everywhere and thought, look, it happened to me 20 years earlier. Now, that's going to be, hopefully, the book. So, here are the lessons learned from PCC. Professors can launder anti-Semitism by hiding behind the marketplace of ideas. Ethnic studies can be helpful for campus Jews. Sometimes it was my fellow Jews who posed the biggest campus anti-Semitism challenges. Not even tenure protects Jews who dissent. And most of all, the smartest place college still does dumb things. Epilogue. We failed to bring the change we wanted. I was not safe on campus, physically, intellectually, or Jewishly. I resigned my tenure and moved to SF State. My dean, Dr. Gretchen Anderson, after her firing, moved to a deanship back east, and she filed a claim for wrongful termination with the federal government's Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, gaining a large cash settlement, which she could not give me the number, but she did smile. She filed a complaint with the federal government's Commission on Civil Rights. They conducted an investigation reporting their concerns to the PCC administration and its board. As a result of all of my documentation of this, I received a federal appointment to California, the state of California's, California's Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Milton couldn't stay there either. He took a new job directing diversity at a small southern university. I'm going to pause right here, because this is like, I've given the talk probably half a dozen times so far. There were exactly 3 people on campus that would talk to me at this point of the story. Milton Gretchen were 2. And the third was a then part-timer who came to me and said, I cannot teach in a college that does this. And you're quite vulnerable when you're part-time faculty, because you need the work. And he said, when I announced I was leaving, I will never teach at this school again. And he never did. And he landed a tenured position at Long Beach City College, and his name is Paul Savoy, and he's right here. This is Paul. Thank you. First time I've spoken to someone. I was there. Who was there through it? We taught together in the good old days. In my last semester at PCC, news headlines blared. Irv Rubin has been arrested for conspiracy to bomb the offices of an Arab American member of Congress, and he was going to bomb a mosque in Culver City, California. When he took delivery of the detonators, the FBI went in for the arrest. Working backwards, we realized that he was doing all of that while he was guest lecturing at PCC. And his arrest came the day the board of directors of PCC was meeting. There we go. So I went back to my office, got on my computer, and started typing one hell of a speech. And it was great until I learned about something called the Brown Act in the state of California. Those are not in the law. The Brown Act says if you're not on the agenda of a public meeting, you only have 2 minutes to speak. Dr. Milton grabbed my office mate, smiled and said, don't worry, I got you covered. Just write your speech as long as it needs to be. So I got up, I started giving my speech. 2 minutes in, they said, Professor, your time's up. Take a seat. I sat down. My good brother Jeff, who was working in the downtown LA law firm, stands up, walks up to the mic and says, what did you say, Jeff? Because he's right here too. He said, I cede my 2 minutes to Professor Marc Dollinger. He sat down, I went up and gave minutes 3 and 4, and then I got seated, and then Milton went up for minutes 5 and 6, and then Milton brought his entire sociology of race class. And one by one, each student kept giving me 2 minutes until I finished the talk. Encyclopedia Judaica is the leading encyclopedia in Jewish studies, and it was being redone and put on the internet for the first time. And what scholars do is we write encyclopedia entries. And wow, how exciting when, sorry. Yeah, how exciting. Oh, that was the first page of the speech that I gave, to there. I got the, so I got 2 entries. They wanted me to write on the Jewish Defense League and Irv Rubin. Yes, word had spread across the Jewish studies country, and this was the editor's opportunity for me to have the last word, as it were. So if you do read Encyclopedia Judaica, it's online, of course. And I want you to know I was quite professional in how I did it, so I think you'll see that. In my first semester at SS State, Gretchen called and asked if I heard the news. I had not. On the morning of his first day of trial, Reuben jumped from the 3rd floor balcony of LA County Jail and died by suicide. His co-defendant was found guilty and sent to federal prison. Days after his arrival, he was bludgeoned to death by other inmates on the 4th yard site of Reuben's death. With closure of PCC, in the most intense way possible, I look forward to a new career at SS State. You got that one. That's my resignation letter. I was named the inaugural Richard Norton Goldman Chair in Jewish Studies and Social Responsibility at San Francisco State University. Those are the Goldmans. She is a descendant of Levi Strauss, which is where the Goldman fortune comes from. And when I went to interview with University President Corrigan, of blessed memory, he said, your job here is to fight campus anti-Semitism. We're a very political place. It can be difficult for Jews on our campus. Are you up for it? I sat down in his office and I gave him the 5-minute version of the story I just told you. You see, SS State was the perfect place for me to land. In 1968, it had the longest student strike in U.S. educational history, shut down the university for more than a semester, creating the nation's first College of Ethnic Studies. This was my place. And after the 3-year fight at PCC, I was ready. If anything, PCC taught me the limits of the Center of Critical Inquiry. Milton taught me the importance of the Identity Project of Ethnic Studies. My Jewishness mattered on campus, and I was ready, but it turns out, I wrote in big bold print, no, I wasn't, exclamation point. SS State is a social justice-centered university, and high on social justice is anti-racism. We want to educate our undergraduates so when they go off to nursing school here in Los Angeles or wherever they go, that they be anti-racist. That what is more meaningful about going off to college than teaching our young people how to change the world and make it a better place? Dare I share my 2 favorite English language words, tikkun olam, to repair the world, except that at PCC, and especially in the College of Ethnic Studies, there's a whole lot of my colleagues who believe that Zionism is racism. If you believe Zionism is racism, then to be anti-racist is to be anti-Zionist. If the Identity Project is meant to bring social justice in the college classroom, then professors must bring anti-Zionism to their classroom, even if their class has nothing to do with the Mideast conflict. Jewish leaders call me every year demanding that I get that anti-Zionist professor fired for bringing their politics into the classroom, for violating the marketplace of ideas, for embracing ethnic studies in the Identity Project. And I would share with that beloved Jewish leader that their request itself is an ethnic studies request. They want me to leverage my Jewish identity to prevent someone else from expressing their ethnic identity. See, because if it's a marketplace of ideas, as most Jews think, Anti-Zionism is a part of the market. If we as Jews don't like anti-Zionism of ethnic studies, then we can't center our Jewish studies in an attempt to stop them. When we do, we become the very ethnic studies we don't want to be. Office hours at SF State. Two of my students came to office hours in tears. They're both Israeli Americans. Both had served in the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces. And they shared with me an update that I had heard overnight, that the president of SS State's Palestinian student group had put a photo of himself on Facebook holding a knife. And underneath the knife was this quote: "I seriously cannot get over how much I love this blade. It is the sharpest thing I own and cuts through everything like butter, and just holding it makes me want to stab an Israeli soldier." We had like 30,000 students at that time, and by sheer coincidence, these two women were in the same poli-sci section as the student with the knife. And they said, "Professor, we can't go to class for fear that we will be stabbed." And by the way, ostensibly they should have gone to the poli-sci professor to tell this story. The number one job of a professor is to keep your students safe in class, even though they don't tell you that in grad school. But they came to me. And they came to me because of my Jewish identity, because of my Zionist identity. It was the Identity Project Ethnic Studies for Jews, because they needed a guarantee that they would be physically protected, and I certainly gave them that protection. When I went home and told Marcy, my wife, about this story, she said, "Oh my God, this is what turned out to be the beginning of chapter 4 of your book. You found the parallel to Milton's story that opened the book in chapter 1. Milton's job as a college professor was to stop a black man from getting killed in America. And my job as a Jewish studies professor at SS State was to stop a Zionist from getting killed on our campus. And now I have the parallel between the two stories. We brought Jerusalem Mayor near Marc to campus. I want you to know, Nir Barkat is a Likudnik, he's a right-wing Zionist, he's in Bibi's government now, he's a minister. You haven't figured out yet so far, I'm on the political left. There's no Israeli, other than Bibi, that I would probably despise more than Nir Barkat. And there I am at APAC, San Francisco, smiling with a picture next to him. If you look at my tie, I'm wearing my Jerusalem outline tie, right? That I'm being as bold as I can be by getting this picture taken. You know, politics makes strange bedfellows. SF Hillel invited Mayor Barkat, and they were brilliant. Because Barkat rumor was he wanted to be the next prime minister, he was going to run against Bibi, and he was coming to, all right. If you're the mayor of Jerusalem and you come to the San Francisco Bay Area, you go to Berkeley or Stanford, you don't come to SF State. And thank you. When you come to SF State, you're expecting protest, and that's what we're about. He knew what was coming. And this was part of his plan. And we played into it, because we, of course, were just thrilled to have the mayor. And Rachel Nielsen-Ralston, who I want to honor as the Hillel professional in charge that day, made a deal with the mayor. For every minute you talk, students get 1 minute to question. 30 minutes talking, 30 minutes Q&A. And then when the Palestinian protesters and their allies came in, about 40 of them, and sat down, Rachel addressed them to say, well, you'll see 2 microphones several feet apart. When the mayor finishes his speech, you can all line up at the microphone and question him on anything you want. This is what it means to go off to college. This is what makes SF State the greatest university on planet Earth to study Israel and Palestine. Because now we have Palestinian students able to be feet away from the mayor of Jerusalem and challenge him any way they want. That would never happen in Jerusalem. This was the marketplace of ideas. And now I'll read from the book. About 4 minutes into Barkat's prepared speech, student protesters began a well-planned series of chants. Following the lead of their organizers, Palestinian students and their allies shouted in unison, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." At the very least, by the way, I wrote this before everyone's now debating that slogan. The chant represented a rejection of the two-state solution, which called for an end to Israeli occupation of the West Bank and the creation of a state of Palestine alongside Israel. For many Jews in the conference center that afternoon, the chant amounted to much more. A free Palestine from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea meant an end to the state of Israel, if not death for the Jews who lived there. And now, I'll show you some of the photos. There we go. Next, they chanted, "Long live the Intifada," a reference to the violent uprising that witnessed Palestinian suicide bombers blowing up Israeli restaurants, cafes, and universities, targeting and killing Israeli civilians. For the Jews assembled, that chant could be read as a threat of violence, a call by protesters for physical harm, if not the death of Mayor Barkat and anyone present who identified as a Zionist. Then protesters pointed at Barkat and with a rhythmic chant let them know, "We don't want you on our campus." They followed with the more pointed, and I quote, "Get the fuck off our campus," over and over again, "Get the fuck off our campus." Marcy was a first grade teacher. She actually yelled in my ear because it was so loud. She said, "I get the rhythmic chant, but I don't like the profanity." If administrators and campus police needed a justification for intervention, these chants offered it. Mayor Barkat had to pause his speech and wait as protesters continued their chants. 15 minutes in, without any sort of police action to limit them, a few protesters actually left the room, walked over to the group's office in the Student Union building, and returned with bullhorn loudspeakers, which they deployed at a deafening level. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Long live the Intifada. Get the fuck off our campus. There was no hope of hearing the mayor, even with his microphone at full volume. Mayor Barkat had no choice but to end his prepared remarks. He stepped away from the microphone, grabbed a chair, and moved as close as he could to the students trying to listen. The Jerusalem leader sat in one corner of the room trying to speak to interested students, while protesters dominated the rest of the space at deafening decibel levels. He yelled as loud as he could toward the undergraduates, trying in some way to connect with them. With police still refusing to intervene, protesters moved from the back to the front, getting much closer to Mayor Barkat and upping the pressure for campus police intervention. Only at this point did 6 uniformed campus police position themselves between the protesters and the mayor. But they did not take any visible action to squelch the chanting, to protect Barkat's free speech rights, or to remove recalcitrant protesters. The most chilling part of the day, though, occurred after he left the room. With Jewish students huddled in the front of the lecture hall, Mayor Barkat said his goodbyes and walked through the exit at the rear of the conference center room. Protesters followed him to the door, continuing their chants, and once he left, started high-fiving, fist-pumping, and screaming in celebration. They had, in fact, prevented the mayor of Jerusalem from speaking. As we call it, the heckler's veto ruled the day. And then, the protesters made a 180-degree turn so they could face the Jewish students seated in the front. Pointing with their fingers toward the group of Jews, they screamed repeatedly, "Get the fuck off our campus." The message was as clear as it was chilling. This protest was not limited to a Likudnik Israeli mayor of Jerusalem. It expanded to include Jewish undergraduates themselves. The protesters sought a campus of ideological purity, which in this case could only mean the absence of Jewish students. At that moment, it ceased to be a protest against a controversial political figure, and it became a blatant anti-Semitic act against campus Jews. In the protesters' minds, Zionists should not enjoy the right to study at SS State. Rattled, fearful, and visibly upset, the Jewish students took some time in the now empty room to gather themselves and check in with one another. I let them know they were witness to history. As if these 20-somethings needed to know about the impact of social media, I still told them that the photos and videos of the previous hour were sure to go viral. They would be centered in much larger debates over free speech, the right to dissent, and the ways in which university campuses, and ours in particular, continue in their anti-Zionist and now anti-Semitic ways. Offering some humor to ease a tense moment, I let one of the students, Brooke, and she let me share her name, I let Brooke know that someday she would be able to tell her grandchildren that during her college days, the mayor of Jerusalem got within an inch of her face and screamed at the top of his lungs, "What's your major?" The administration defended the shutdown. They falsely claimed it was protected speech. In a series of meetings with Jewish leaders, the university president, who is no longer there, said Jewish campus climate is not a presidential concern. He ordered us not to bring up the topic with him anymore. He asserted that Jews took more of his time than any other campus group. That was anti-Semitic. You're number 4, and I let him know the top 3. He told the Jewish newspaper, San Francisco, that not all Zionists would be welcome on campus. He advanced the Jewish power anti-Semitic trope to Jewish leaders, and he affirmed the trope even after I pointed out that he just said something anti-Semitic. He told me that protecting Jewish students from physical assault was nothing more than, quote, a political issue. At PCC, I was the right-winger's view of anti-Semitism. I was powerless, an oddball, a force destroying their community and campus culture, part of a multiracial coalition bent on challenging the power of senior white faculty and administrators. At SS State, I was the left-winger's view of anti-Semitism, all too powerful, leveraging that power to destroy SS State's campus culture, bringing Zionism, in their mind racism, to an anti-racist place, separating myself from any sort of multiracial coalition because I was a fully identified Jew, a Zionist. At PCC, I opposed a right-wing Jewish speaker because that invitation revealed campus anti-Semitism. But at SS State, I demanded a right-wing Jewish speaker because forbidding that would have been anti-Semitic. Yet, still, on each campus, I was cast as a threat to the very mission of that university, whether it was the marketplace of ideas at PCC or ethnic studies identity project at SS State. At PCC, I ran to the identity project to protect Jewish interests, but at SS State, I ran away from it because of its anti-Zionism. In this sort of campus culture, anti-Zionists who want Jews removed from campus realized they had power. Something called anti-normalization is when anti-Zionists won't ever speak even to a Zionist, and its president normalized anti-normalization. San Francisco Hillel was invited to participate in the Know Your Rights Fair, which was after Trump's first election, to help students understand their immigration rights in the new administration. But then Hillel got uninvited from its invitation. Apparently they were told because they ran out of space. Thank you for the laughter, because a good Samaritan came forward and told us the truth. There was plenty of space. They just wanted the Jewish student group expelled because they were Zionists. The organizing committee of the Know Your Rights Fair included faculty and administrators, and they all decided together to expel Hillel from it, and 30 minutes later they invited an off-campus Jewish anti-Zionist group to protect themselves from the charge that they were anti-Semitic. I went with the regional director of the ADL and our Hillel director of Sacramento to meet with many elected legislators, the Jewish Legislative Caucus, to put pressure on the chancellor of the Cal State system, to put pressure on the president of San Francisco State to deal with this. I'm happy to say that the head of every ethnic, racial, gender caucus in Sacramento signed our letter of concern. But my favorite meeting was with the head of the Black Caucus in Sacramento, Assemblymember Chris Holden, And I remember that name because Chris Holden used to be the mayor of Pasadena, and he was the mayor of Pasadena when the PCC thing happened. So after I gave the SS State story and agreed to sign on, he said, I actually taught at PCC, and we had this thing going on when you were the mayor. And he says, oh, that was you. So he remembered me. So I appreciated that we had a person in Sacramento who was now linking both halves of these books. So Amanda Vernon, now at INS, she led the effort that brought state and federal lawsuits against SS State for all of this. I was designated the lead fact witness in the case, but I never got to court. For those of you who are attorneys in the room, on the morning of jury selection, it turns out a landmark settlement was reached. Lawyers, once the jurors are coming into the jury box, sometimes get motivated to settle the case. The Cal State University system declared that Zionism is a part of Jewish identity, which is a key legal component to defining anti-Semitism. All cases of anti-Semitism must be adjudicated off campus for the next 4 years. They had to dedicate $200,000 of educational dollars to Zionism and other related topics. They had to create and fund a Jewish student life coordinator, and they had to pay $36,000 of legal fees. And how perfect is that? $36,000. Okay, 18 is life high, 36 is double high. I called Amanda, I said, you are so good. You've worked in the 36K. So that Cal State University is invoking the Jewish mystical tradition. And she said, actually, it's all by, the bureaucracy tells you how much money they get. I didn't do it on purpose, it just ended up 36K. So, Amanda, if you believe in the Kabbalah, there are no accidents. At PCC, the administration used the Center for Critical Inquiry approach to marginalize Jews and deny us protection. At SF State, the administration used ethnic studies to marginalize Jews and deny us protection. Jews are liminal. We are in the awkward space between it all. Sometimes we're ethnic studies. Sometimes we're the Center of Critical Inquiry. And we get anti-Semitism from both sides of the aisle. We are either too marginal or too powerful. And as an academic in the Department of Jewish Studies, we are the ones to study. We are the ones to learn from when it comes to understanding the complexities and the implications of the meaning and purpose of higher education, of the place of one's identity in the workplace, of understanding how anti-Semitism works from both sides with competing assumptions about Jews. What do we need? In the world of campus anti-Semitism, academic responsibility that's linked to academic freedom. Senior administrators willing to act. And I'll say that the president of SF State at the time retired. I'll put it this way, retired under pressure because the announcement was made in November. I'll just say I received a text from a senior member of the SF State administration that said, Mark, check your email. And Marcy and I were actually on a ferry boat in New York City at the time. And I'm like, oh my God, I think he's gone. You know, and I clicked it, it was a YouTube video. It's noisy in New York. I had the iPhone up to my ear. And she's like, what happened? What happened? He's still talking. It took about a minute and a half before he announced that he was going in. Fortunately, we have a new president, President Mahoney, and she got right to work. In my first meeting with her, it went great, and at the end of the meeting I said, what can I do to help you in this new job? And she said, Mark, if you ever see me approaching the third rail around campus anti-Semitism, text me. She hands me her cell phone number. Then she invited Marcy and I to her home for dinner, where she cooked us salmon and fresh vegetables. And I pulled her aside and said, I know why I'm here. There's close to 1,000 teaching faculty at SF State, and they don't get the president cooking dinner in her living room. And I said, thank you. I see what you're doing, and I appreciate what you're doing, and it's working. Friday afternoons, I get these texts from her, Shabbat Shalom. In September, I get a text, Shana Tova. And when issues arise on campus, we are calling and texting and emailing multiple times a day. She was going to be here tonight because her husband's a professor at Long Beach State University. It was a confidential call, but she's traveling now with her spring break, but that's literally why she's not sitting here today. She sent her administration on a 2-year training on campus anti-Semitism sponsored by the Academic Engagement Network. She sent our DEI administrator out to learn. He brought Jews into DEI at SS State. And Hillel offered a conference to teach all the Hillel professionals on what to do, and they brought him in from SS State to teach Hillel how to get it right. After October 7th, we had, of course, a bunch of protests, and President Mahoney likes us to call her Lynn, so I don't mean disrespect when I call her Lynn. Lynn called me and said, Mark, I don't want you at the protest. She knows that my job, I was hired to be the one to fight campus anti-Semitism. I've attended every pro and anti-Israel rally in 20 years at SS State. In case there's trouble, I need to be able to say I saw it with my own eyes. And I said, Lynn, you know I haven't missed a rally in 20 years. It's my job to be there. And she said, Mark, you're a public figure, and I'm worried about your safety, and I don't want you there. And I was like, wow. So I said, first, you are the university president, and you're making a request, and that's meaningful to me. And I said, second, for the last 20 years, I haven't trusted the university president, which is why I'm there. She proceeded to give me the long list of all they had done for security to protect everybody's right to speak and to dissent. And I said, I will skip it. And she said, thank you, and the other Jewish leaders are all coming there because they said that you said they needed to be there. Will you call them and tell them not to go? So I said, yes, I will call off the Jews. My office is here. My 2 o'clock class is here. Malcolm X Plaza, where the rally was in the middle. So I did like a big walk like this all the way around to get to my class. And when I'm walking this way, I'm looking to the right because I want to see what's going on with the rally, how many people are there, and can I understand what they're saying. Like, I'm doing the best I can. And I hear a voice from my left side saying, hello, Mark. And I turned over to find a middle-aged black man in the bushes talking to me. Took me a second and a half or two to realize that that was Reggie Parsons, who gives me permission to share this story, SS State's chief of police. He said hello, I said hello, and I went to teach my class. I got home, I told Marcy the story. She once again told me where it fits in the book. She said, Mark, do you realize that at PCC, the white Jewish police chief refused to protect you, but at SS State, a black non-Jewish one did? I think Milton would like that. Thank you. I'll take questions, but if you could please form your question in the form of a question, I would appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to know what happened in the last year and a half at
Stay in my school?
Yeah, how did they really deal with all the, and one other
Yeah.
statement. I listened to some Zoom programs from the Hillel in Northern California, and I'm
Yeah.
aware of anti-normalism.
Yeah.
I've never heard that phrase before. Can you clarify that, and where is it now?
Okay, anti-normalization is too many syllables. I wrote about it. So Jay Weekly wanted me to write an op-ed on this, and I did. And the editor said, you got to get rid of anti-normalization. It's too long. And I said, I'd love to get rid of it, but that's the problem. It's a political ideology of the far left that you cannot normalize the enemy, and Zionism is the enemy. An anti-normalizing student will not take a Jewish studies class. Even if the class is not about Zionism, because if you study with a Zionist, you're normalizing Zionism and you're aiding and abetting the enemy. Hillel wants to have dialogue with Palestinian students. Anti-normalizing students won't be in dialogue because the act of dialogue normalizes Zionism. So anti-normalization is a rejection. So when President Mahoney called me in, and we had that first meeting, that was my agenda with her. I said, look, you're going to get challenged on anti-normalization because there's a faction of our campus that won't speak to me because I'm a Zionist. I think the nature and purpose of the university and SS State is to engage difference. Anti-normalization does not engage difference. So I said, just be prepared. Like you're probably going to have to make a public statement at some point about whether or not you agree with anti-normalization. What's happened since October 7th on campus? We were 6 weeks late on the encampments with Columbia. I think our student body was embarrassed that SS State, the founder of the College of Ethnic Studies, still had not encamped. So they ultimately decided to encamp, and I'll just share more of my inspiration from President Mahoney. She has an open door to Jewish students and to Palestinian students. I mean, every single student is her student, and she let me know that, and that's of course her job. And the student protesters demanded a live negotiation in the encampment with the university president, live streamed on Instagram. And she said, fine. Got in the elevator from her fifth floor, got a folding chair, set it in front of the encampment. They set up the camera. If you're Instagram people, you go find it, and they negotiated. They of course wanted BDS divestment from Israel. And she said, this is a great line, she said, I am not the Secretary of State of the United States, nor am I the Secretary of State of San Francisco State. And she said, she's not here to divide students on political issues. She's here to get all students through college, which I thought was great. And ultimately, again, came down to the end of the semester, as they did most around the country. She committed to not divesting from any region-specific anything, and they didn't.
Yeah. Could you explain the argument behind Zionism and racism?
Okay, Zionism and racism came from the United Nations resolution in 1974. It ultimately comes actually from a Soviet propaganda campaign that had predated that, and a nation state with Jewish ethnic supremacy that treats Jewish people in a superior way based upon their status as Jews, and then gives a lesser status based upon a different classification, would be their definition of racism. So it would apply within Israel itself because Israeli Arabs or Palestinians with Israeli citizenship is effective, the politics of what you want to call it. The 20% of Israelis who are Muslim, another way to put it, are living in an unequal status in a democracy. And then you move to the West Bank and the occupation, and then of course the Gaza and everything that's happened since October 7th. There is a hierarchy of who has rights, legal rights, real rights, and Jews are on the top of it, and they see that as the racist enterprise. Yeah.
I thought the UN canceled that declaration of Zionism as racism in 1991.
The United Nations did overturn its declaration that Zionism is racism, but did not stop it on the campus of San Francisco State University. They have yet to rescind the resolution. That's right. Yeah.
I know that there are Muslims in the Knesset, and I've spoken to people who are on the Business Association of the City of Haifa, who said the Jews, the Muslims are all ownerships and stores and centric businesses in Haifa. We get along, there's no problem. Is there a bias against the Muslims in Israel?
Okay, so thank you for the question, and I'm now going to avoid the question only because we started with questions directly related to this book I wrote, and then to those that are tangentially related and important. But now we're off into what I would call Israel studies, so that's not my field. And really, what it's going to do is just going to open us up to what could be a larger debate, which I'm very much uninterested in having. But thank you, and if you'd like privately afterwards, I'd be happy to chat with you about that one-on-one. Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit more about the colonization concept that ethnic studies pushes in the three areas, all the areas?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people don't know that that's an underlying ethnic studies theory from South America.
Correct.
That has integrated into, it started with Latin American and all that.
Yeah, so this is an anti-colonialism argument by Paulo Freire, who is, I believe, Catholic religious leader in one of the South American countries. And the notion is, what is responsible for the world the way it is? That's like the biggest question one could ask. And if you're a Marxist, it's about economics, and if you're about racism, it's about the color of your skin. Like, different people have different answers. The argument here is that colonialism was the historical force that has changed the world for better and for worse, meaning colonized countries got the worst, non-colonized countries got it better. So if you want to make the world a better place, you have to be anti-colonial, you have to decolonize the curriculum, which is the phrase how it works in ethnic studies, which means you have to go through and find out the ways in which the enterprise of colonialism has robbed mostly indigenous people of their rights, of their culture, of their language, and that is an anti-American idea, because the United States is seen as colonial, and Israel is then seen as the mouthpiece or the junior version of the United States. And then the Jews become the colonizers who came into the indigenous land of Palestinian Arabs. And of course, the counter-argument is you can't be a colonizer if it was your country 2,000 years ago when you were expelled and you were a refugee, right? So there's actually three major colonizing arguments. Two say that Israel is a colonizer. One says that it cannot be a colonizer. And everyone picks whichever one they like, and they don't think about the other two. I'll leave that at that, yes.
In the couple of weeks since Trump withheld or threatened to withhold $400 million from Colombia, and you've seen in the news, you know, a bit of a shift in their mindset. What's going through your campus as a result of that?
Yeah, so unrelated to any of the above, San Francisco State University went from 30,000 students when I arrived to 14,000 students now. And we're in the midst of the fifth year of horrendous budget cuts. We basically have no part-time adjunct faculty left. And that's the bad news. It's not good news, but we're not getting much on the Israel-Palestine Zionism debate now because the entire university is. In July, we're going to get a letter to tell us how many tenured faculty are losing their jobs. So that's what is present. To generalize your question, you know, it's a mess. So to be equal opportunity here, because you did invoke the Trump word, and that of course can get people agitated in a variety of ways. Every fifth American Jew, close to every fourth American Jew, voted for Trump the third time he ran. So I want to say that the American Jewish community is segmented in the way it would respond to your question, which is to say there is a large, and it's segmented, it's mostly Orthodox, former Soviet Union Jews, like just in terms of who's voting on the political right versus who's staying on the left. And they see in Trump's action as the first unapologetic Zionist, and then they look to the left of the Democratic Party, which is Zionist ambivalent and anti-Zionist. So if you're a one-issue voter, Trump is getting a disproportionate number of Jewish votes than Republicans typically do until you go back to Reagan. Reagan was like the last one that got a larger percentage of the Jewish votes. So that group loves what's happening in Colombia because finally there's a president who has taken it seriously. I think it's safe to say, because there's a letter just came out with several hundred of my colleagues in Jewish studies. I don't know if you signed, not signed it. I'm not asking if you signed it. I'm just bringing that up, condemning this idea of saying that cutting hundreds of millions of dollars from Colombia is going to help campus Jews. And Jewish studies professor said, no, this is just, in their minds, in this letter, cover to advance an anti-university agenda by Trump, leveraging the anti-Semitism as the false point. So I've just laid out to you arguments on both sides, and I'll let that sort of sit with you, and then we can not have demonstrations. That would be good.
I guess. Okay.
I want to offer appreciation because a whole lot of really intense topics and subjects that are quite divisive came up. And I want to thank you for your openness and for listening, and it's great to be on.
Thank you so much.